Today I'll teach you how to make arm aiming. I have this character here which can run around in 2D. If I push on the right stick all the way out to the edge, she'll point in that direction. And I can even point behind her and it will animate smoothly. Or I can make it so that when I point behind, she turns to face that direction. I do this using a little rig, which points the same direction as the stick, which turns it into a useful angle we can use to drive the animation. Also, the rig could aim at something in the scene, like this robot, and follow it around even when it moves. So let's find out how we can make that. Go to TAPgiles.com to learn dreams, engage my services, and support the channel. First, let's make that rig. It's pretty simple. Let's just turn on grid snap and add a block. I'll make a second block up here and then use a bolt connector to join them together. So this bottom part will be our anchor point and the top part will rotate with our stick. Let's move this bolt into the center of the side there and turn it around, and now it can rotate around like this. To make things clearer, I'll just edit the rotating part and add a pointer to the side. Now if we play time, this will be affected by physics and flop about like this. We don't want any of this to be affected by physics, so I'll select both of them and tweak them. Make sure it's non-collidable, has low density, and ignores gravity. And now it won't care about physics at all. I want this top part to look in the direction we push the stick. So I'll add a chip to the top half and open it up with L1 and X. Now we can make it look in a direction with a look at rotator. So I'll add that to the chip and add a controller sensor to get the right stick output. I'll set it to remote controllable so that we can still possess our normal character, but use this to get that output. In the third tab, we have right stick local. This is the 2D direction the player is pushing on the stick. If we wire that into a splitter, we'll see it's a fat wire with two values going through it instead of one. This splitter splits those out into their individual values again. The stick has an X value and a Y value. X for left and right, and Y for up and down, like a 2D coordinate. But the look at rotator works in 3D, so we need to convert this into a 3D coordinate. I'll make a little bit of space and add a combiner gadget in 3 numbers mode. This lets us turn 2D X and Y into 3D X, Y and Z. We don't care about the Z axis, because that's pointing in that direction, where we won't be aiming anyway. We want to aim just in X and Y. So I'll wire X into X and Y into Y. And plug that into our lookout rotator into the scene space direction input. So we're getting the right stick direction, converting it to 3D, and telling the lookout rotator to look in the same direction. It will make this arrow turn to face that direction. Now it's moving really slowly, so let's adjust the settings so that it snaps to point in the right direction. Let's up the strength and damping and speed. And try again. Pushing up on the right stick actually makes it point down, but right and left work okay. So Y needs to be flipped to make it work correctly. Let's get a calculator and plug Y into it, and then multiply it by -1 to unflip it. and then plug it back in and remove the old wire. I'll just move these along here, so we're flipping Y so that the 3D direction is correct. And now when we push up, it points up, and left, and right, and down, and it all smoothly rotates. Now we want our character's hand to point in the same directions. So let's move that out of the way, and open our Puppet logic. We'll use keyframes to position the hand. While recording, I'll use R2 to grab the hand to set its position, and L2 to rotate it around. You'll see it has hash marks going across like this. That means Dreams uses inverse kinematics, which takes the position of the hand and rotates the rest of the arm automatically to match. You can convert between inverse kinematics and forward kinematics by selecting the hand and click Convert to FK. And now instead of basing it on a position, it's simply rotating each part to make the hand go to that same point. And now they're all rotations of the arm. But I'll remove those and let it figure it out automatically. So I'll use R2 again and position our hand. So this will be our pointing forwards keyframe. I'll have another one to point up, one pointing down, and one pointing back, which will be a bit awkward until I turn the body to face that way a bit better, which makes it look more natural. We can even do things like tilt the head to face that direction as well, like this. Now we can put all those into a timeline so that they blend together. Here I'm holding L1 to snap them to the columns. For this logic, it doesn't really matter about the timing, just that they're the same distance apart. Then use L1 and X between the keyframes to add tween blends, and you can see it draws out a path based on those positions that smoothly curves through them. And if we drag the playhead along, you can see the hand follows that path. You might come across a situation where the arm isn't quite sure how to rotate, and so it kind of flips out a bit. To help with that, we can give it a hint. These keyframes set the position of the hand and move between them. If I turn the timeline off for a minute, we can add another keyframe that rotates the arm. This gives it a general rotation the arm wants to be in, while also trying to get the hand to the position, which can help if there's some ambiguity in how the arm should turn as it animates. Then we put that onto the timeline and have it active during the whole timeline. I'll turn the timeline back on, and it's all pretty smooth. And then to animate between the back pose and up pose, we can add the up pose to the end, which completes the loop. Now just as we talked about before, the elbow is kind of flipping out here. So I'll need to adjust the position of the hand to make sure it rotates around properly. If we pin the timeline to the screen, we can look at it from a different angle to get a sense of what's going wrong. So the hand's moving to the right position, but it's rotating around the wrong way. So if we rotate this position around a bit, it'll take a better route, so it doesn't flip out the arm. You'll notice though with the path, the sides are smooth, but the top is pointed. Like it doesn't know that it's got to go around in a circle. It knows how to smoothly animate from there to there, but it doesn't know it's got to go all the way through to there next. So we can give it a hint by copying that pose over here. Now the curve of the path is smoother all the way around here. And we can do the same for this. It knows how to get from there to there, but doesn't know it's got to go back round to here, to this pose. So we'll copy that pose over here. And now going around the top this way is smoother as well. And then we can use the trim handles to ignore the beginning and end bit we added, so that the animation only cares about this zone here. But because of these hints, it can make a smoother path. Now if we make the timeline loop, the hand looks nice and smooth. In fact, this hinting is automatically done if we have loop on, but now you understand exactly how it works under the hood and can make smoother animations even if you're not looping that bit of animation. Now we have this loop, we want to move the playhead to different points to have the character point in different directions. And that will be based on this rig over here. We want to know how far this is rotating and move the timeline through by that amount. In the menu, go to Show Hide and turn on Connectors to make sure you can see the bolt. Then tweak the bolt and it has a Connector Completion output. Let's see what that gives us by getting a number displayer and wiring it in. It'll only give us integers by default, so let's increase the decimal places. And go to play mode. Now as we point in different directions, it's giving us a number. Between -1 over here, round to 0, and then up to +1, depending on what this angle is. We need to convert this to a number between 0 and 1. A percentage. We'll use a signal manipulator in custom remapper mode, and we know the input is between -1 and +1, and we want the output to be from 0 to 1, and that's what this will do. Then we can wire the output into the timeline's playhead. Let's leave that on the screen and use Modes, Test Mode to see how that affects our timeline. I'll push right and start pushing up and it moves along the timeline as we wanted. But our character isn't pointing in the right directions quite yet, so we just need to reorder our keyframes to match. Let's point up first. So we want our up keyframe to be at that point in the timeline. We'll exit test mode and find our up pose. I'm using L1 and left and right on the D-pad to go through the keyframes. So the up pose is this one. And I'll just copy that down into that slot. Now let's find the next one. If I point the stick right, it's that point on the timeline. And pointing right is that keyframe, so I'll copy that keyframe into that slot. So if that's up and that's right, the next one should be down. That's our down keyframe, so I'll copy that. And then this should be pointing back, which is this keyframe. And then it should go back over here as well. I want to turn off this whole row so that we're only seeing the new row we've made. So I'm going to tweak the timeline and turn on Show Sidebar, which shows these buttons over here. Then we can turn off that entire row. And now our keyframes are in the order our rig wants them to be in. And in test mode, I'll push the stick right, and up, left, and down. I noticed a tiny little gap at the beginning of our animation, So make sure to snap it to the column so it's right at the start. And now even looping back through here is nice and smooth. I'm going to select both of these by double tapping X on the parent object, the anchor, and then group them up. Now I can just make the whole thing invisible. So as I run around, I can point the stick in a direction, and our character will do the same. And we can even point backwards. So now I can play the game and point at whatever I want in the environment. But when I'm facing this direction and point right, I want to be pointing back for the character, but it's still facing the other way. This is because our rig hasn't flipped around the same way our character has flipped around. So let's have it do that. Let's give the character a tag so our rig can match its orientation. So we go to Gadgets, and Sensors and Input, and we'll add a tag. I'll call this the shoulder tag, as that's where the hand will aim from. And then move the gizmo up to the shoulder. Notice that Z is pointing up and Y is pointing left. We'll need that later. So we'll have this whole rig teleport to the shoulder. We get a teleporter and surface snap it onto the group by holding L1 when we place it. We don't care about the position for now, so we'll turn that off. We only care about the orientation, so that when the character is oriented round like this will match it. I'll use up and down on the D-pad to cycle through the tag names in the scene to get to the shoulder, and I'll leave our group visible so that we can see it as we play. Now it's not oriented correctly. Remember Z going up and Y going left? We need our teleporter to be the same. So we'll have Z pointing up and Y pointing left. And now when we turn to face different directions, our rig matches. And if I point right with the stick and face the character left, it adjusts accordingly and points backwards. So we're still pointing in the correct direction, no matter which way our character is pointing. And if we're trying to aim at something in the scene, we can aim correctly. Thanks for watching the series so far. If you enjoyed it, give it a like and subscribe. The next part shows how to auto-aim at things, and how to have the character turn instead of pointing behind them, and a handful of other useful tips.